All right, great. I think we can go ahead and get started. First, welcome. As I said, I'm Kelly Gasper. I'm the investment facilitator for the South and Southeast Asia Regional Innovation Hub. Before we kick off, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Do please put yourself on mute. There will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So I'll have some points that I'll run through just to anchor our common understanding in the investor expressions of interest solicitation that we're discussing today, and then we'll get into some Q&A, which is the point of the session. The EOI itself, if you've had a chance to read it, I think is fairly detailed, and you may have had the chance to attend the previous session that Dr. Ku McMahon gave like a week or a week and a half ago. So some of this may be information you've already heard. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly just to make sure that those who didn't have the chance to read the EOI or listen to Ku's presentation also have that information, and then we'll get into Q&A. Just a few housekeeping notes up front. The session will be recorded. We're recording right now, just as a general FYI. And also, please do put your questions directly in the chat. My colleagues are monitoring the chat, and we'll be lining up the questions for after we finish with going through some slides. Last thing I think to mention before we dive in is that we welcome anyone and everyone who's interested in being part of the Water and Energy for Food journey, obviously, to this session. The key target audience, I would say, is investors, blended finance providers, or service providers that are offering some type of transaction advisory. That does not mean that if you're not one of those three categories, you should drop off. We very much want you to be here. But just want to clarify that for the cohort innovators, if any of you are listening in, there's nothing specific for you to do or to have prepared for this session. So it'll more just be a kind of an informational session for you. Great, okay, good. Rena, if we could just go to the next slide, please. Great, so we'll talk through just three broad topics here. I'll try to keep it brief, but we'll see. Want to make sure that we have an adequate level of detail for the Q&A. Do a bit of a recap. What does the brokering unit do? How does it fit in with the hub? We'll talk about the EOI, understanding how the brokering unit will work with the types of organizations we're seeking to attract to the program, and then we'll wrap up with just an overview of our submission requests, the type of information we would ask that you submit if you're applying, and then what we look for in our assessment process. Next slide, please. Great. Okay, thanks. So I want to just provide a very brief overview of the hub. I think everyone on the call is generally familiar with the South and Southeast Asia Regional Innovation Hub, but let me just provide a little bit of grounding context. The hub acts as an accelerator to promote the expansion and increased impact of organizations that are operating in the water, energy, and food nexus. And what we mean by the water, energy, and food nexus is organizations providing innovative products and services that will allow smallholder farmers or other stakeholders in food value chains to produce more food using water and energy more efficiently. Really important to also note that every aspect of our work seeks to incorporate cross-cutting themes of gender equality, environmental stewardship, and economic mobility for low-income segments of the population, also known as base of pyramid populations. So I said the word accelerator, and I want to sort of clarify here, since that has certain connotations in the investment community. When we say accelerator, we're not talking about an incubator accelerator setup where early stage startups or R&D phase startups or even idea stage startups are being sort of nourished and nurtured. We're talking about established organizations with track records. We do support some NGOs, not-for-profits, universities, for example, and other non-commercial organizations, but I think of most relevance to the audience on the call, and where the bulk of the brokering unit's work, if not all of the brokering unit's work exists, is with these private for-profit enterprises. So I think that'll be the emphasis for what we talk about today. The process of acceleration takes place first from our solicitation. We do a careful screening process. We bring companies in whom we think are a good fit from both a sort of a mission-driven perspective and also a commercial viability perspective. We then work with them to create an acceleration work plan, and the brokering unit's two sister teams, which are the technical assistance unit and the enabling environment unit, along with us in the brokering unit, we all have our sort of role to play in ultimately making those organizations, those companies, more investable and able to scale so that they can achieve their maximum social or environmental impact. That's often synonymous with expansion of their enterprises. So business growth, revenue growth, and growth of returns or of the bottom line is synonymous with this increased impact. And the reason we know that's true is because we've very carefully selected the types of companies that we're going to be supporting in the first place. Our current cohort has the following characteristics, speaking generally. They're post-revenue, revenues ranging from the low to mid hundreds of thousands of US dollars to the low to mid single digit millions of US dollars, so somewhere in that range. Many have achieved operational break-even, some have not. Many have also achieved previous rounds of equity financing, which has given them a post-money valuation. And those post-money valuations we find are generally in the low to mid single digit millions of dollars. Some are a little bit higher though, but I would say that range is probably fair. And in terms of what they're looking to do, it's expansion CapEx, a little bit of working capital, but expansion CapEx in almost every scenario for those that are looking to raise. And those tickets are between, I'd say, $500,000 and the mid to high single digit millions of dollars. There are a couple outliers that are larger than that, but I'd say between, again, $400,000 or $500,000 on the low end, and then maybe $5, $6, $7, $8 million on the higher end. As I mentioned, we do this solicitation each year. Right now, we're supporting around 20 companies. We'll be doing another solicitation in December. The reason I mention this is because if you affiliate with the Hub through this EOI and plan hopefully to work with us for the rest of the program, which is another 3 years, you'll be getting access to a replenished pipeline, a growing pipeline of these companies. So by, say, January or February, we're intending to have 35 or 40 companies we're supporting, and so on and so forth. We have a mandate to support a minimum of 40, but the pace that we're going, it looks like we will be exceeding that, which should be good news. It means more pipeline for investors and a broader community of support. Getting into the brokering unit mandate specifically, we'll call the brokering unit that only captures a little bit of what we do. In addition to coordinating connections between capital seekers and fund managers or lenders, capital providers, we also offer tailored investment advisory support. And the goal of this support is to reduce upfront costs and mitigate information asymmetries. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We work really closely with the technical assistance unit, which provides commercial TA, which will help with increasing investability. We then come in as the brokering unit when a deal is ready to be undertaken, and we pursue the activities that you can see here on this sort of schematic. So from the capital seeker side, this is understanding ideal capital structure, positioning for investment by creating or refining a financial model or a pitch deck, a teaser, an investment memorandum, this type of thing. We stay with the deal after it's launched, working with investors as a neutral intermediary to narrow down the universe of investors to those most relevant and interested in the deal. And we then work through structuring, aid with commercial due diligence, aid with negotiations leading up to close, and then assist with the sort of logistics and administration of close as well. So I won't go into these in greater detail now, but I do want everyone on the call to know that the brokering unit is more than just kind of a light touch matchmaking or speed dating style platform. We do have a very substantive investment advisory offering. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll get into a bit of the EOI itself. 4 broad objectives, which you can read here on the screen. We want to identify potential partners, we want to then onboard those partners, and then once we're working together, we want to identify innovative approaches to either deploying or catalyzing capital, bringing capital into the cohort companies that we've been working with. And we want to ensure that we're doing this paying very close attention to the thematic areas around gender, BOP impact, and environmental sustainability. So let's dive into these in a little bit more detail because I think it's worth spending some time. What types of potential investment partners are we looking for? What does that mean? If you have the EOI, it's on page 4. We explain this in a little bit more detail, but essentially 2 broad categories of organizations we're looking to work with. The first would be capital providers, and this can be a broad range of different types of capital providers, everything from what we would term maybe commercial investors or returns first investors that have obligations to their limited partners around a certain expected internal rate of return. Maybe they have a certain hurdle rate that's very important to plan for, down to impact-oriented investors who perhaps have a little bit of a different profile in terms of their either risk appetite or investment mandate, lenders of various types, blended finance providers, such as development finance institutions or anyone else. And we'll talk a little bit more about blended finance in a moment. I think important to mention that for capital providers, if you are a fund manager or somebody who's got capital that you need to deploy, responding to this EOI and becoming involved with Water and Energy for Food does not in any way obligate you to commit capital to anything. All that we're asking is that you are willing to review the pipeline and that you are willing to consider deploying capital into opportunities that are interesting to you after the appropriate due diligence. So there's absolutely no formal kind of amount or other commitment that you need to make in affiliating through this channel. The other broad bucket of organizations we're looking to attract through this channel would be professional services firms whose activities can complement the organic capabilities of our hub, usually the broker unit, but also the commercial TA elements of our TA unit, with the goal of supporting, again, the implementation of blended finance solutions, getting deals done, and the sort of attendant activities around those things. So this could be an instance of direct support where perhaps your specialty is project finance modeling, and you are interested in sort of coming in and helping with creating or refining Excel documents for the company cohorts. That might be an example of direct support. If you were to take a little bit more of a broad kind of top-down approach, you might be facilitating broader program objectives in terms of connecting the pipeline to capital providers or to some other useful element of the investment ecosystem. For number 2 here, what does it mean to be onboarded? I know that's a vague word. Generally just means that we're entering your information into a database and that you then will have access to our pipeline. And what that access will look like will be regular updates about our pipeline companies in the form of a one-pager or something similar, like a teaser type document that will be emailed out. And again, these will be deals that we believe are investable. Obviously, we wouldn't share them with you. They'll have been thoroughly vetted. They'll have the appropriate materials either complete or very close to complete and in process. We'll be working on a virtual data room. We'll be working on preparing for the diligence process, all these things. So when you get materials from us, you can rest assured that a lot of work has gone into the relationship with the company before that one pager is making it to you. And the other element, we'll talk about this in a sec, but is access to a broad community. I mean, we have pretty substantial convening power. As some of you may be aware, we have a number of donor sponsors from 4 different countries, plus the European Union more broadly. And each of those, and then them together as a group, bring a tremendous amount of convening power. Items 3 and 4 here, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't spend too much time. But once we get to work, we want to identify approaches that will allow us to deploy the maximum amount of capital in accordance with, again, risk appetites, mandates, geographical mandates, as we can. And we want to ensure that we're paying attention very closely to the social and environmental impact objectives of the program. Next slide, please. So we can dive into these in a bit more detail. You can also read, I know there's a fair amount of text on this slide, but we see ourselves as offering 4 different sort of areas of value to those who affiliate through this channel. I should clarify again, as the question has come up, in the past. This is not a program that provides monetary compensation in exchange for services. If you are a service provider and you're interested in being paid for your work, we do have a different channel for that, and I'd be very happy to help facilitate your application through that channel. But this is not that channel. So we believe that the benefits of pursuing this venue for partnership are what you can see here. We lower upfront costs. This means that we've already assembled and started to refine a pipeline. It's closely curated. We're doing this pre-deal commercial TA to where if there's a gap in a cohort company's anything, operations, HR, marketing, sales, product design, anything along the sort of spectrum of different elements of a business plan that's being addressed. And we're also monitoring through our colleagues in the enabling environment unit, the macro environment, regulatory environment, sort of understanding where there might be hurdles to expansion, this type of thing. So all of that represents work that your internal teams don't have to do, or at least don't need to do from scratch. You can spot check or corroborate our work, of course, as you see fit, but that's the way in which we try to lower these upfront costs to getting a deal originated. We also look to reduce information asymmetries. This has to do with us being a neutral intermediary. We're performing the appropriate amount of what we'd call sell-side sort of commercial and financial due diligence. We're doing that enabling environment due diligence. We're working on populating and organizing virtual data rooms. And then most importantly, we have access directly to management teams, and we've built a rapport with the management teams so that you as an investor or a blended finance provider or a service provider can interact with them without the sort of friction or initial trust issues that may come up in some scenarios. We also have the ability to crowd in co-investors and blended finance solutions. So what that could mean is you're a lender and you're impact oriented, but you still can't get comfortable with a certain deal, and you'd really love to have subordinated debt of some type be brought in underneath your senior tranche. That is something that we can cast a wide net into our networks and look for. We can bring in perhaps guarantee providers. We can bring in some cases, even junior equity providers of some type. So we do have that as a major goal. We do have an organic blended finance capability as well. It's rather modest in size, but it does exist, and I'll explain it in just a little bit. And then we are looking also to have proprietary access to a special guarantee fund that's being finalized now that should be ready in the fourth quarter of the calendar year that would benefit any lenders as well looking for those types of downside protection. Last item here, I've sort of already been explaining this, but we come with an extensive network. As I said, 4 different donors from 4 different countries, well connected, lots of resources, and lots of adjacent and complementary programs from each of those countries, and then regionally as well, that can bring more resources, in some cases greater budget for us, but I think most importantly for the audience on the call, a greater supporting ecosystem to getting these deals done. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the following slides, but I did want to put them up because I want to just offer some thoughts around how the brokering unit is going to interact with different potential respondents to the EOI. So this schematic is, I know there's a lot of sort of shapes and, and words on this page. It's just meant to be an illustration of the investment facilitation process in action. So Water and Energy for Food is providing this pre-funded, free of charge transaction advisory. We look to affect outcomes at the deal level. So the dotted boxes is centered on direct investments, a little bit less relevant, perhaps intermediated funds, but that could also be a venue for deploying capital. And on the left-hand side here is a wide range of different types of investors. Illustrative, of course, I'm sure there are some categories that may not be fully represented here, but the idea is that we work with these direct providers of capital, whether they're commercial investors, DFIs, even donors, if there's a grant that's being structured in as part of a blended finance solution. If there's capital coming from an organization into the We4F program, we have the ability to assist in various ways, as I've been describing. Next slide, please. We also have the ability, as I've said, to work with blended finance solutions. On the left-hand side here, just kind of a definitional point, but we consider the entire hub to be a blended finance solution. And what we mean by that is that transaction advisory and commercial TA to increase the investability and investment readiness of a company, if it's funded by a third party, can and should be, in our opinion, considered blended finance. But more specifically regarding structures, I mentioned a few of these, but we want to crowd in providers of sub-debt, junior equity, some other type of first loss tranche or first loss capital, a guarantee, in some cases a grant that's creatively structured into an investment, in one way or another. So just want to highlight these as well. Next slide, please. So here I also want to just briefly touch upon our organic blended finance capability. We call this investment matching capital. It's not a huge amount of money, but we do have it at our disposal, and it's very flexible. We have the ability to deploy at our discretion directly into deals. And by flexible, I mean, unlike some other elements of this program, there's not a requirement for a broad solicitation or an RFP process or this type of thing. We can be quite agile with this. So if if that last $50,000 or $75,000 makes a very big difference in terms of the use of proceeds, maybe reaching a threshold to begin construction of some type on a new expansion project, and we can come in and provide that, then perhaps that'd be a scenario where this would be really catalytic and instrumental to getting that deal done. Next slide, please. So when it comes to service providers, I think this is not meant to be very rigid. I know it's kind of depicted as this definitive organizational chart, but it's just meant to illustrate the general relationship that we would hope to have with service providers that affiliate with us. And that's where there's a lead investment facilitation firm or platform. In that case, it would be the brokering unit within the Water and Energy for Food Hub, of course. But we want to work with all types of complementary service providers. There are capabilities that we don't have organically, and we would undoubtedly benefit from having local legal counsel, local auditors, somebody who knows the accounting systems of a certain country, if those are challenging to understand, versus IFRS, for example. We want to understand the local capital landscape at a level that it's hard to, if you're not very, very, in very close proximity, very local to some of those capital providers, so local brokers, and any other sort of complementary ecosystem stakeholders. So this is the broad sort of vision for how we work with service providers as well. I think the last thing I'd add here is just that we're not looking for somebody to come in and take away from the core mission of the brokering unit. There are instances where we certainly could use the extra bandwidth depending on what we have going on. So that could be possible, but we're mostly looking for complementary offerings and a way to kind of create a synergy here in approaching these deals. Next slide, please. The last piece I want to mention here, I should have mentioned it briefly before, but we can talk about it now. We also, as the broker unit, have the mission of furthering consumer credit and user financing. So as will be familiar to many on the call, a number of our supported companies sell products that are really expensive, and the target segments that benefit from the most are not able to pay all at once. So there's some need for end user financing, and that could come in the form of financing from the company's balance sheet, perhaps partnering with a lender of some type to increase the amount of working capital flexibility that the company has, maybe partnering with an MFI to provide that capital externally, but with an understanding that the use of proceeds is going towards the product or service that's being considered. So we assist with design of these opportunities, recognizing when they could be a good idea, and asking some of these questions that I've listed here on the slide, just to be able to, again, sort of move the conversation forward and then help refine the approach to consumer credit scheme if that's warranted. Next slide, please. Cool. Okay, so yeah, let's discuss a bit around the EOI process. If you had the chance to attend Ku's webinar recently, you will have seen this colorful slide here. So I think it's pretty straightforward. We would be at the stage of soliciting responses, of course, which would be the sort of yellow circle at the bottom there. We'll then review them and select a group to become affiliated with the hub through this channel, through this process. And again, that results in what we would characterize as like a pre-qualification, which means that you are regularly receiving updates about our pipeline, and those are coming to you in very legible, sort of crisp format, something like a one-pager, and that's happening on a rolling basis. The other thing that's happening on a rolling basis is that submissions are accepted, so there's no finite window to apply. You may even decide that you're not interested now, but come back and check in with us in February when we have more companies that we're supporting, because undoubtedly we'll be expanding our pipeline to different countries, different geographies, maybe different products. So if something doesn't fit your mandate or your risk appetite or your general sort of lens right now, it very well could early next year. So that's why we're keen to have this remain quite flexible. Next slide, please. So I want to just walk through these quickly. I think everything is spelled out pretty clearly in the EOI document, but just to go through in a little bit more detail, the offerer overview is just a company overview. What does the organization do? So, sort of basic information, the name of the company, a brief summary of your services. Again, just one or two sentences is fine. We just want to understand how you position yourself in the ecosystem. Website, this type of thing. Authorized point of contact would be the person whom we have direct contact with initially, but it doesn't have to be the person that we would eventually work with on a deal. So just an initial point of contact whom we can trade emails with as we're getting set up. This idea around the capacity for making or catalyzing potential investments is the most important thing, I think. We're not asking a lot of information. We don't want this to be a burdensome process. We recognize there's no monetary compensation, and we want this to be very much something people are excited about because it provides them access to a pipeline. So we just want some information around your preferred ticket size, your investment lens, your preferred instrument, which countries maybe are included in your mandate. If you're willing and able to disclose your target returns, or if you're a lender, your sort of range of interest rates that you might pursue. And I think the point here is just to understand fit, make sure that we're mutually aligned on fit. It's not meant to be a very rigorous screening process. It's meant to just make sure that we're making good use of everyone's time. We then also would just ask a brief cover statement, just a couple sentences even, or paragraphs. Does not need to be long to kind of round out our understanding of your organization. Next slide, please. There is an optional component. If you have materials prepared, some on the call may have a teaser or overview or profile of some type of your organization. Please do feel free to attach that. It'll give us some better color. If you want to, you can develop a sort of specifically tailored component that will provide us more detail around how you intend specifically, again, to collaborate with Water and Energy for Food. But this is not mandatory, and not submitting supplemental materials will not harm your chances of being affiliated or being led into the program. Next slide, please. So in terms of the way, I talked about this a bit already, in terms of the way we're planning on assessing applicants, we're just looking for capacity. We want to know that you have the organizational capacity, the desire, and the mission alignment to bring value to the program. So we've laid out these three broad sort of themes, this idea around fresh, informed, realistic thinking, sector-specific experience. We want to know that agricultural value chains and agritech and other innovative approaches to ag sector are part of your general lens. And we want to know that you're willing to engage in what we hope is a robust multi-year relationship with the hub and again with our community and our ecosystems. There's some fine print at the bottom here. The most important of which is if you do not have the desire or time to write this all out, but it's easier for you to get on the phone, we're very happy to schedule a call with you where you can relay this information to us, and we will ensure that it's captured in the appropriate place and that you remain on file through that option. So that could be easier for some. All right, I'm going to stop there. That's all that I wanted to get through for this portion, and would like to take the chance to answer any questions that may be out there. Okay, great. Well, I'm getting an indication that maybe there aren't any questions immediately, but we certainly welcome engagement throughout the process. And if there's anything we can do to clarify any points that I've discussed today or that are in the EOI, please don't hesitate to reach out. There was an email address on the previous slide. So with that, I'll conclude. But again, thank you for those who attended. And if you're listening to this as a recording, thank you for your interest as well. And we hope to see you coming through in the responses to the EOI, and very much look forward to working with you going forward. So thanks very much.